Good afternoon and welcome to the WEIM Governing Body General Session meeting. Please note this meeting is being recorded and all attendees are currently muted. When we get to the public comment portion of the call, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen to enter the verbal queue. Finally, closed captioning is available by clicking the Show Caption icon at the bottom of your screen. With that, I'll go ahead and turn the call over to Chair Andrew Campbell. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Silas, and welcome everyone to the September 19th General Session of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. I'll go ahead and turn things over to General Counsel Roger Collington for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Roll call, we'll start with you. Chair Campbell.
Here.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
And Member Wagner.
Here.
Thank you, governing body members. We do have a full and complete roster, and we have a quorum and can go forward.
Okay, thank you, Roger. So now we'll go to public comment. This is the time for comment on any item that is not on the agenda. And Silas did just provide the guidance for that, but we'll go ahead and if you have a public comment, then please raise your hand.
Absolutely. If you have a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to enter the verbal queue. If you are dialed into our phone-only line, you can press #2 to enter the verbal queue. There are no hands up in the queue at this time.
Okay, thank you, Silas.
Great.
So now we will move to the adoption of the general session minutes from June 22nd. Roger.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair Campbell. I had some technical difficulty. Can you hear me okay?
Now I can. There was a little bit of stutter in the sound a second ago.
Okay. All right. So for the need a motion to approve the June 22nd, 2023 WEIM governing body minutes, general session minutes. Can I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Member Decker moved, and second, please.
This is Rob. I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Rob. All in favor, actually, since we are virtual, let me do this individually. Your vote, Chair Campbell.
Aye.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Aye.
Aye.
You may have just lost Roger.
I think we did.
He's coming back, I see.
Roger, we've lost you. We're gonna have to maybe you want to try disable your video.
I'm back now. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
I apologize. You know, my computer's been working fine all day, and I think it wants to torture me, so I apologize for that. But so I was with vote on Member Decker.
Aye.
Okay, and Member Prescott.
Aye.
And Member Wagner.
I'll abstain because I wasn't appointed yet.
Okay, we have the motion passes 4-0 with 1 abstain. Back to you, Chair Campbell.
Okay, thank you, Roger. And just before I hand things over to the CEO, Elliot Mainzer, for his report, just a couple comments. Once, thanks to all of you for joining us virtually today. The governing body had hoped to be in person for today's meetings and for the joint meetings tomorrow, along with the Board of Governors of the ISO. Unfortunately, COVID hospital admissions have increased in Sacramento County, putting the county in medium or yellow status. This was, of course, we're going back to the past again, but that required us to go to virtual only in order to protect the health of employees and meeting participants. I appreciate several of my colleagues made the efforts to get to Folsom prior to that change in COVID tier. At today's meeting, we're going to hear updates from the body of state regulators and the Regional Issues Forum. We'll also discuss the latest Western Energy Imbalance Market benefits report. And finally, there'll be a briefing on ongoing policy initiatives, of which there are quite a few meaty ones. Thanks to stakeholders for your considerable focus on these ongoing initiatives. I did also want to note at the California ISO Board of Governors meeting on Thursday, they'll be considering a final proposal addressing the ISO's participation in EDAM, which is a very exciting step toward EDAM's startup. The governing body does not play a role in that decision making, but I did want to encourage other balancing authority areas to learn from the ISO's process. Some features such as the net transfer constraint, which address the reliability within a balancing area, will be important for all EDAM participants. And I really appreciated how the Department of Market Monitoring developed comments for this initiative that really had in mind trying to help other balancing authority areas also as they think about implementing that constraint. So definitely take a look at those. So thank you. So now I'll hand things off to ISO CEO Elliot Mainzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the governing body. It's great to see all of you. I too would have really liked to have been able to have us all join in person these next few days. It's tough to see the persistence of the pandemic, but safety first, and so there we are. It's also nice to see a few ties here and not as much sort of Hawaiian shirts as we start to turn the corner on summer. It's been another interesting summer across the West. I'm going to just provide a few highlights of some of the topic areas from my CEO report, starting with the summer update. I think, as many of you are aware, this year was really, in some ways, sort of a mirror image of last year, particularly in July. If you recall, last September, California was stretched right to the edge with an all-time record of fall September heat wave. Set the all-time demand level in California. We were in the midst of a historic drought and really relied extensively on imports from across the West and, very truly unique demand response tools in order to maintain reliability. Well, cut 10 to 11 months later, and the Columbia snowpack was now in the Sierra Nevada. We had the all-time record snowpack in the Sierra Nevada, 244% of average. Several thousand megawatts of additional generation on board in California, another couple thousand megawatts of batteries, and really quite honestly, in the grand scheme of things, a relatively mild summer in California in general, where we never had a sort of simultaneous day where all of our load basins were hot at the same time. The tables turned entirely. The Northwest, of course, has had a really well below average, I think 77% of average hydro year up on the Columbia, and down in the desert Southwest, all-time record heat and demand. I think they had, more than 30 days consecutively of more than 110 degree temperatures down in Phoenix, which is really kind of hard to believe. And so this summer, particularly as we've gotten to July, relatively modest loads inside California, but tremendous level of imports into other states, a lot of exports out of California. A lot of activity in the energy market, which really, I think we were back on July 20th, close to just about 96% of the all-time WEC demand we saw last summer. Just the tables really turned. And so, we definitely ran into some challenging conditions holding all of the pieces together. We've just released a very, very comprehensive market report on the events of July 20th and 25th and 26th. We just a strong believer that when we get into situations like this, transparency and detailed, I think, exhaustive analysis and really trying to learn from these events is really critical. So in that report, you can read, very closely about what was happening both inside California, what was happening with respect to exports, how the energy imbalance market was performing, what kind of tools we used during the energy emergency alerts, and some of the key lessons that we'll be able to draw from this experience. I think every year we learn a few more things and we see the West behaving in different ways. But again, through July, and then of course in August, we'll be having a comprehensive report on August again in a few weeks, just watching the West work together leveraging the transmission connectivity between the different supply basins, leveraging the diversity and weather patterns and geographical capabilities and resource diversity. Very encouraging and just another reminder of how important it is that we work together across that wide area to support reliability and affordability for all of the people that we serve. There will be a stakeholder call on September 27th to go into the report. We look forward to folks' participation and any further questions to make sure that we leave no stone unturned in understanding the events of this summer. Turning to the markets, obviously, I think all of us who've worked together across the West these last couple of years, just an amazing number of people who have supported the EDAM effort. We were so excited on August 22nd to file with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission the EDAM tariff and the associated day-ahead market enhancements. Just a big milestone. And again, I just want to always just express so much appreciation for all the people that logged so many hours of workshops and so many hundreds of pages of comments and just an incredible amount of feedback and input into the design of this market. It's now before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We did request a sort of expedited review, or at least we asked the commission to rule on our tariff filing by December 21st. There is a lot of work ahead in terms of implementation, and we want to kind of get moving on that. And of course, for those of you at the EDAM forum, or just more generally, we also have another EDAM member who is committed to the market. Just a couple of weeks ago, we heard from the Balancing Authority of Northern California and its largest member, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, that they also intend to join EDAM. Could not be more pleased or honored with that development, adding to PacifiCorp's commitment, just adding another tranche of transmission capability and resource diversity to the market. In our early discussions now with both PacifiCorp and EDAM, both are now thinking that whereas we've been talking about a 2025 launch date for EDAM, I think right now we're targeting more a 2026 timeline. Seems to potentially more feasible, allow everybody to make sure that we get all the basic infrastructure laid down. Those conversations are dynamic and will continue to be fine-tuned, but wanted just to make sure everybody knows that at this point, 2026 is a more likely timetable. We'll of course be keeping FERC apprised of our implementation schedule, while also I think doesn't really change anything in terms of wanting to get moving and building out the infrastructure and the tariff filings for EDAM. So thanks again to everybody. And just as I noted in my CEO report, the EDAM forum in Las Vegas on August 30th was also just really enjoyable event. We were really appreciative of NV Energy and Bank and Southern California Energy and PacifiCorp in joining us, Southern California Edison, in joining us in sponsoring that event. Thanks again to the team at NV for hosting us down in Las Vegas. Really amazing turnout. I think 240 people in person. I think we had another 300 to 500 online. Kind of amazing. And just so appreciative of the ability to kind of air out the different perspectives that we have across the West on these critical issues around market design and governance and just policy development. Really appreciated that. And of course, it was just great to hear from our colleague Jim Shetler at Bank about their announcement. So just brought a lot of good energy, and we're just excited to keep going. A lot of good, I think good momentum on EDAM, and just a lot of work ahead. But thanks to the whole group, I really also particularly appreciated the CEO panel. It's just critical as we work together across the West to make sure that all the different perspectives are getting on the table, that we're hearing them, that we're working together and developing a market and a governance framework that can attract the widest possible participation. I also wanted to turn, of course, there's so much happening at the CAISO on transmission, not only the ongoing work on the update of the long-term of our 20-year outlook, the work on our now moving towards implementation, energization, and construction on many new transmission projects. A lot of support in California legislature for expediting transmission construction in California. Really appreciate it. But one of the core areas that we're really focusing on is interconnection process enhancements. Our IPE2 initiative is well underway. We have really brought the sort of working group approach to that initiative, and we're able to work very closely with the stakeholders to develop shared principles and clear problem definition from the very outset of that initiative. I've gotten a lot of great feedback. We are planning to publish a straw proposal for that enhancement initiatives on just in a couple of days on September 21st. Wanted just reading directly from the CEO report, really kind of getting to the essence. The IPE2 straw proposal envisions a streamlined process with prioritization of commercially viable projects in zones with available transmission capacity. Our goal is to see the most advanced projects move forward into a streamlined single-phase study process with more explicit provisions around time and queue to prevent projects from lingering in the queue and frustrating future development. We're on track to bring these changes to the California ISO Board of Governors at the February 2024 meeting. So this initiative is working and moving, at a great pace, incredible participation again from so many folks. Of course, at the same time, we're working on compliance with FERC order number 2023. So we're doing both of these initiatives in sort of parallel with each other. And there are a number of critical developments coming out of order 2023 that I think will be leverageable and very important parts of our overall final proposal. But as FERC themselves have acknowledged, they're encouraging folks who are really digging in to go even further. And that's going to be our intention in our ultimate proposal next year. The compliance filing for Order 2023 is due on December 4th. So we plan to comply within the required time frame. And then, as I mentioned, bring our IPE2 changes to FERC once we have board approval early next year. So a lot of work there. Thanks again to everybody. And I'm just excited to really, as you know, our central thesis continues to be, we don't look at interconnection queuing in isolation. We see it as part of a set of gears that have to work together between power and transmission planning, really embracing good proactive transmission planning, and then coordinating queuing and procurement so that we can make sure that we can onboard the 7,000 megawatts per year of new resources that we need to get on this grid in order to stay on track with the state's energy policy goals. So a ton of work. We're just absolutely committed to making that happen. Finally, just a couple things that I think you saw. It's a very interesting phenomenon is going to be occurring on October 14th. We're going to be having an annular solar eclipse that's going to pass over the Western United States, including California, Oregon, Nevada, Utah, and New Mexico. And on September 1st, we've been trying to get ahead of this. This is going to be an interesting moment. So on September 1st, our short-term forecasting team published a technical bulletin about the eclipse, identifying some of the potential risks and possible measures to be taken by the ISO, the WEIM, the RC West, and other balancing authority areas. It's the last time we had an eclipse like this was back on August 21st, 2017. But this is going to be a more impactful event because the growth in solar capacity since 2017 has been pretty remarkable. The ISO's grid scale and rooftop behind the meter solar have grown by 6,500 megawatts and 8,550 megawatts respectively just since 2017, while the EIM footprint grid scale and rooftop solar have also grown by 9,400 and 5,700 megawatts respectively. So there is a lot more resource, a lot more ramping capability. And the eclipse will, of course, impact both grid scale and, rooftop solar generation with some significant ramping activity. So I feel like we're well prepared. I think the study work is quite interesting. It sort of takes a kind of a worst case look at this situation, but we are, really trying to stay on top of this. And we are going to continue coordinating through RC West, the utility distribution companies, and WEIM entities to ensure both stable market operations to support reliable system operations on the eclipse day. And we're going to be doing a lot of documentation and probably a big write-up on this, big lessons learned, and then project it out a few years to the next one. So always learning and always trying to stay ahead of the curve on these events, given our changing resource base. Finally, as noted, the WEIM second quarter 2023 benefits were released on July 31st. The second quarter benefits were at $379.9 million, bringing the first half of 2023 to almost $800 million of benefits, really reflecting the growing number of participants, providing diversity in economic energy transfers, and replacing more expensive generation. And of course, the environmental benefits continue to grow with a cumulative reduction in greenhouse gas emissions since the WEIM started now of more than 878,000 metric tons. So the EIM, which really is, of course, our foundation stone for Western market integration coordination, continues to perform. And looking forward to, when we get a little bit deeper into the fall, be able to look back at both July and August. And I look forward to sharing some of the additional findings of just watching all of our Western tools working together so effectively. And thanks to all of you as well for all your support and continuing to help us grow what I think has been a very successful platform. So that concludes my remarks, and thanks again for the time tonight.
Thank you, Elliot. Do any members have any questions of Elliot? Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Elliot. So now we'll hear an update from the body of state regulators. With us today is Thad LeVar, Chair of the Utah Public Service Commission and Chair of the body of state regulators. Chair
Good
LeVar.
afternoon. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Konziolka, and members of the Western EIM governing body. I want to congratulate the members on their new roles, specifically Chair Campbell on being chosen as chair of the governing body, and congratulations, Member Wagner, on your appointment to the governing body. We look forward to your leadership and the continued partnership between the BOSSR and this group. I also want to congratulate the California ISO and its staff on the submittal of the extended day-ahead market tariff to FERC last month. As we all know, the EDAM policy initiative was a major undertaking for all stakeholders involved in the BOSSR, and the BOSSR was pleased to hear of this filing. I'd also like to congratulate the ISO on the filing of the Day-Ahead Market Enhancements Initiative as well. The BOSSR looks forward to following the tariff approval process and continuing to stay engaged as these initiatives move toward implementation. As for current BOSSR activities, we've recently been dedicating our monthly meetings to educating the body's members on the various pre-initiative activities that are underway at the ISO. We've spent our last few meetings reviewing the developments of the Greenhouse Gas Coordination Working Group, as well as the Price Formation Enhancements Working Group, and we continue to provide opportunities for our members to stay abreast of the developments in each and to evaluate the right time for more formal BOSSR input. Additionally, last month, the BOSSR and the Western Power Pool's Western Resource Adequacy Program Committee of State Representatives, or COSR, convened in a joint educational session to hear from the California ISO and the Western Power Pool on the interoperability of RAP and EDAM. We found this joint educational session to be very useful and helpful, and we particularly appreciated the participation of Anna McKenna to present the process and perspectives from the ISO. We would consider convening again with both groups in the future whenever there's a need to better understand the interoperability of those two programs, as well as the interoperability of RAP with the ISO's own resource adequacy program and how that impacts both the WEIM and EDAM operations. The BOSSR recently completed another session of market training for BOSSR members and utility commission personnel. These are joint efforts that involve significant support from the ISO and from WEIM, and they continue to be valuable in keeping regulators educated and informed on market functions so that we can participate and comment as appropriate. Several BOSSR members were able to participate in the recent EDAM forum in Las Vegas, and we appreciate all the work that was done by the ISO to put together this opportunity for discussion and education. And from what I've heard from everyone who participated, it was useful.
Destination is on your left, 13881 East Drive.
I promise I'm not driving while I'm reporting right now. The BOSSR is currently reviewing its 2024 business plan and budget. BOSSR staff are working with the state-regulated market participants on any comments or feedback related to the draft, and the BOSSR aims to review and approve this budget by the end of September. This will be my last report to the governing body as BOSSR chair. We'll be announcing new BOSSR leadership next month. I just want to say that I've truly appreciated the opportunity to interact with the governing body in this capacity. The past 2 years have been a critical time of market development, and it has been a rewarding opportunity. The BOSSR leadership team taking over next month will keep that momentum moving forward as we look forward to upcoming implementation dates. Although I will be stepping down as chair, I will continue to represent the Utah Commission on the BOSSR, and I look forward to continuing contributions to these issues. I want to specifically thank Haley Williamson for serving as BOSSR vice chair for these past 2 years. Her contributions have made the BOSSR's planning seamless and successful. And I want to thank Bonnie Lamond and the rest of the WEIM staff who do lots of work behind the scenes to enable the BOSSR members to engage with the governing body without sacrificing the necessary attention to our day jobs. And lastly, as a reminder, our fall meeting will take place on Wednesday, October 4th in connection with the CREPC-WIRAB meetings in Seattle, Washington. We've received some positive feedback from BOSSER members since the meetings last spring in Incline Village, Nevada, so we plan to follow a similar format for the BOSSER and other similar entities to meet the first morning of that agenda. I look forward to seeing as many of you there as are able to make it. And this concludes my update for today. On behalf of the body of state regulators, I want to thank you for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair LeVar, for that update. And thank you so much for your service as chair of the body of state regulators. I mean, I think sort of testament to your leadership. I know we've all gone to a number of the BOSSER meetings over time. Like, your colleagues are all there. So many of them are there. They're voting with their feet. They clearly see a lot of value in the programs that you've helped put together. I've really appreciated your focus on education. That's really key for all of us as the region moves into this. You've really, kind of upped the game, I think, on education as chair. I think also, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Like, now everybody wants a bosser. If anyone sort of sets up any kind of market construct, they're like, okay, let's create our own bosser. And I think it's sort of seeing the effectiveness of the group that you've chaired has been a big part of that. So thank you so much for your service in that role. And I'm glad to hear you'll be continuing representing the Utah Commission on the bosser.
Thank you.
Member Vice Chair Konziolka.
Chair LeVar, Andy said it well. Thank you. Greatly appreciate your leadership with the bosser. You've really moved things forward. The bosser has been valuable in providing input to the governing body on decisional items, and the work that's been done to educate the various regulators, which is not an easy task, is just invaluable. So they understand the complexities of the issues that are going on and being able to get brought up to speed. So thank you for your service, and greatly appreciate all you've done for the bosser and for the governing body.
Thank you.
Member Dicker.
I just want to echo what's been said. Chair LeVar, you've just been amazing to work with, and your leadership clearly has shined in the bosser work. So really do appreciate that, and also just the opportunity to get to know you a little more deeply than just as a member of the bosser, and maybe wouldn't have had as much interaction as you being chair and when I was chair. So again, thank you so much, and I am really glad to hear that you're going to continue in the role on the bosser. So we'll look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you. I really have appreciated the opportunity to get to know each of you, and it's been a great experience. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Chair LeVar. Now we'll turn to an update on the Regional Issues Forum. Providing today's update is Vice Chair Meg McNall, who represents the 6 cities, which is one of the ISO participating transmission owners. They're part of that sector, the ISO participating transmission owners sector. Meg.
Good afternoon, Chair Campbell. Can I do a quick sound check?
Yes, we can hear you.
Terrific. Well, good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Konziolka, and members Decker, Prescott, and Wagner. My name is Meg McNall, and I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the EIM Regional Issues Forum, and I'll be providing a brief update regarding the RIF today in place of my colleague, Chair Josh Walter, who wasn't able to make today's meeting. Just this past Tuesday, on September 12th, the RIF convened its 4th meeting of the year. After opening remarks from Chair Walter and our EIM governing body liaison member Decker, the RIF heard from representatives of the CAISO regarding potential changes to its process and approach for updating the annual policy initiatives catalog and roadmap. As discussed by the CAISO team, the ISO is looking for ways to enhance its process for the catalog and the roadmap to make these tools more functional for the CAISO and for stakeholders. We also discussed ideas for the RIF roundtable discussion regarding stakeholder policy priorities. And as I mentioned during the meeting, the RIF is very interested in feedback from the RIF stakeholder community and encourages members of the RIF to reach out to their sector liaisons with any input on the roundtable process, which we're aiming to implement for the first time in 2024. During the September 12th meeting, we also heard from John Paulson, the Vice President of Power Marketing for the Western Area Power Administration's Desert Southwest region. WAPA Desert Southwest joined the EIM in April of this year, and Mr. Paulson provided an overview of WAPA's decisional processes and transition into the market. Finally, we had an in-depth discussion of price formation led by RIF liaisons Lauren Tenney-Dennison and Alex Spain. During that panel, we had a presentation from Bob Helrich-Dawson of the FERC and from Paul Gribick and Jim Gonzalez, who discussed scarcity pricing and market power mitigation concepts in the MISO and SPP markets. Finally, James Friedrich, on behalf of the CAISO, provided an update on the ISO's ongoing stakeholder initiative for price formation, which thus far has included a series of working group meetings in anticipation of a discussion paper and action plan later this fall. At this time, the next scheduled meeting of the RIF is expected to be on Monday, December 11th, in conjunction with the governing body taking place that week, hopefully in person at the ISO, and we're still working on the topics for that meeting. That concludes my remarks. Thank you for allowing me to provide you with an update on the RIF, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Vice Chair McNall. Any questions from governing body members? Okay. Well, thank you.
So Andy?
Yes.
So this is Anita Decker. So I would only make a comment that in terms of this last RIF meeting and the value of the price formation perspective, I thought the RIF really is coming into its own in terms of looking at the initiatives that are in front of us and making sure people kind of see the alternatives and way things that the way that things could go. And again, I just want to reiterate, we do look forward to comments from the RIF, not necessarily consensus, but just comments from the RIF about how they see some of these initiatives going forward. So I appreciate you and Josh's leadership, Meg. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Now move to the next item. I believe this will be introduced by Anna McKenna, Vice President for Market Design and Analysis.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Yes, I have the pleasure of presenting Guillermo Bautista-Alderete. He'll be giving you an update on the WEIM benefits for this Q2, the second quarter of 2023. And with that, I will ask that Guillermo, please commence your discussion.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Anna. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman Campbell, members of the Western Energy Imbalance Market governing body, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. This briefing covers the imbalance benefits for the second quarter of 2023. Next slide, please. During the second quarter, we saw significant benefits in the total amount of $379.9 million. This is the fourth largest quarterly benefit observed since we implemented the energy imbalance market. And there are several factors, drivers contributing to this level of benefits. First, we have a very steady increase in the number of entities participating in the market. Most recently, we have Avangrid, El Paso, and Work joining the market back in April of this year. Participation of more entities enable more economic transactions, not only for the new entities, but also for the existing ones. Secondly, we continue to see robust levels of volumes and transfers among the different areas. And this is a reflection of the economics of the wider footprint. And the third one, the economic transfers also result in economic displacement of high value energy. When there is an energy transfer realized, a cheaper energy transfer will effectively displace more expensive generation in the receiving area. This will be shown as benefits in the way of cost savings. Next slide, please. With the second quarter benefits, the total cumulative benefit that we have so far is at $4.2 billion. We indeed reached that mark back in May of this year. This level of gross economical benefit reflects the value and also the effectiveness of the market to meet supply and demand at the least cost, and that is across a wider West footprint. Next slide, please. Another benefit of the imbalance market is what we call the avoided energy curtailment. if not for the energy market facilitated with these transfers, some renewable generation has to be curtailed. The portion in this figure reflected with the dark blue bars is for the curtailments in the CAISO system, while the bars in the light blue represents the avoided curtailment due to the imbalance market. There is a dotted line trend that also reflects the cumulative avoided curtailment from the EIM market. As we can see, avoided curtailments continue to accrue over time. Obviously, there is a seasonal trend. We typically see the highest volumes of curtailments for the CAISO around the second quarter of every year. And that continues to be the case in 2023. There is also a very interesting trend. You may see that the level of curtailments in the CAISO continues to grow. That is despite the relief provided by the imbalance market. And that is largely because the renewable curtailments in the CAISO system are mainly driven by congestion, not just because of an oversupply condition that can be cured by having additional exports out of the CAISO system. Next slide, please. One of the main benefits of having a wider area market is the ability of that centralized engine to find out every megawatt available for every area in the system and place it economically where it's needed the most. We have seen that very clearly during the summer conditions in either direction. And this is possible through the many areas participating in the market and the transfers that these areas enable. This illustration shows all the connectivity among the different areas participating in the market, including the newly onboarded areas of Avangrid, El Paso, and Work. As more areas are participating, providing more transfer capabilities, that is something that the market is going to enable and leverage through this centralized processing of the clearing. Next slide, please. A significant share of the benefits is from the transfers across the balancing areas. The transfers enable access to lower cost supply. This is how a locational-based market can leverage and maximize opportunities across the wider footprint. This figure in particular illustrates the total flow of transfers among the balancing areas in the second quarter. The size of the stream flow reflects the relative volume of the transfers. On the left-hand side, we have the set of balancing areas where the transfer is coming from. On the right-hand side, we have the set of balancing areas where the transfers are going to sink. Areas on the left are exporting power, while areas on the right are importing power. This is a simple way to illustrate the interaction of the balancing areas through the enabling of transfers. Also, this allows us to see how the total transfer, This also allows us to see how the total transfer of each area is contributing to many other areas. There are many streams, as you can see in the figure, which illustrate that there was a very large number of transfers happening in many different ways. And it's a reflection of how effectively a centralized market is able to find every single possibility and economic opportunity to balance the supply and demand in the system. Next slide, please. Transfers are quite dynamic because they are optimized every 5 minutes. And in general, they tend to show certain patterns through the day. This figure in particular illustrates per month the hourly profile of the transfers across the different areas. A positive value represents a transfer import coming into the area, and negative value is going to be an export going out of the area. Typically, what you can see in this profile is that the CAISO area tends to export a significant volume of energy during the midday hours when solar production is plentiful. And then, as we approach the peak hours, that switches to become an import transfer. Other areas such as PowerX and PAC and Tucson Electric will be the counterparties taking on these transfers. And we see this very clearly in the second quarter of 2023. Next slide, please. Lastly, we have the trend of prices. Overall, prices saw a declining trend in the second quarter. We started with relatively high prices in April due to still high gas prices. And as we progressed through the second quarter, prices naturally declined. This is a time when demand was still relatively low, and we continued to see large renewable production. This was also the time when hydro started to come in. Conditions therefore were ripe for plenty of supply and relatively lower prices. The illustration also shows as a reference for the external prices. What we use are the bilateral power prices from ICE. We take a reference from a hub reference from the north, another hub reference from the south, Mid-Sea and Palo Verde, just to compare how the external bilateral prices are tracking relative to the CAISO prices. What we saw in particular for this second quarter is that the bilateral power prices were generally speaking higher than the CAISO prices. We don't have all the information to understand all the fundamentals of these bilateral prices. It's simply a very interesting trend that we are tracking. That's what I have for this briefing and conclude my presentation. I will be glad to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Guillermo. And we're going to go to public comment in just a moment, so you can think of if you have any comments to make. But I'll go to governing body members. Any comments or questions? Any questions for Guillermo? Vice Chair Conziolka.
Thank you, Andy. Guillermo, always appreciate your presentations. I think that they continue to be quite educational. Information always is kind of being updated to present things in a new perspective. So I just want to say thank you, because I think this really helps present a good story that continues to evolve over time. And I think the one thing I really take away is really the diversity that this tends to display. And it's quite interesting when looking at it. It doesn't always match what you might expect to see as to where power is coming from, where it's going. And even in this last quarter, when you take a look at just April, May, and June in contrast, how different that can be. So always appreciate getting this kind of good news. And so thank you.
Thank you for the comments.
Any other governing body comments or questions? Okay, Silas, could you please provide the instructions for public comment?
If you'd like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you're dialed into our phone-only line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the question queue. We do have one caller in the comment queue.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Good afternoon. This is Tara Davis from APCO. Thank you for allowing me to ask a question. On the slide that had the robust from Guillermo, could you tell me a little bit more about the makeup of the CAISO lines? Like, what power is that's being shared?
Yes, let me elaborate. This represents the total volume for the quarter, is aggregating all hours for the whole quarter. And this figure doesn't distinguish the time of the day. I would have to say, when we look at the more granular information, a vast majority of the volume transactions happening as transfer imports, meaning power going out of California, typically are concentrated in the middle day of the hours. That is when we have plentiful of solar production, generally speaking, and therefore the economics is in place to use that energy to displace more expensive generation across the West. We don't have a way to track specifically what supply technology is supporting each megawatt of the transfers. It's just an aggregation of all the energy. But by the time of the day, you can infer that a good portion of that is going to be supported by plentiful of generation when solar is concurrent with other type of supply.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, there are no further comments in the queue at this time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Guillermo.
Thank you.
Let's now move to the next item, which will also be introduced by Anna.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. I think I will take this presentation as well. So I'll introduce myself.
Actually, I see a hand up. Member Decker.
So, Chair Campbell, it might be maybe for our next session, the slide that the question was just asked about on the robust, it might be well to maybe tease that down another level for our next session to bring that, maybe make it a little bit more transparent to the public in terms of the exporting particularly, because I also was interested in how much the CalISO was actually exporting based on that slide. So maybe they can think about how can they tease that down another level at our next session.
We can take that back, and Guillermo and I will make sure that we provide a little bit more information on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I'll be providing you a briefing on a number of policy initiatives that are ongoing here at the ISO. Next slide, please. I'm going to cover an array of them. I'll walk through the slides quickly, but please feel free to ask me any questions that you might have on any of these initiatives. On the EDAM effort, as noted by Elliot, we were very pleased to have filed the proposal for FERC, and it's now in front of the Commission earlier in August. And we are looking to receive, or we're hoping to receive, a decision by December 21st. And I will note that comments are due this week on September 21st. So we're preparing now to respond to the comments that we expect to receive very shortly. And as noted by Elliot, we also have now received notice that the Balancing Authority of Northern California is interested in joining as well, and working with the participating entities. Will be, we're already in the midst of putting our efforts towards implementation and working towards implementation in 2026. Next slide, please. With the day-ahead market, as you might recall, we filed these together with the EDAM, and so the timeline is the same. We expect and hope to have an order by December 21st, and the comments are due this week. On the day-ahead market enhancements, you also might recall that we promised that we would be commencing a working group effort to focus and evaluate on certain parameters that are inherent in the design of the imbalance reserve product, which is a critical element of the day-ahead market enhancements. And we can expect to start those discussions in 2024. And just as a reminder, the stakeholder effort is sort of it's a production-focused effort to coordinate in a pre-market implementation set of working groups with stakeholders for us to define the scenarios and provide the data sets that we will be validating the parameters with. Stakeholders will have an opportunity to also review and evaluate the results of those scenarios that we run, and provide feedback and guidance on the parameter changes based on the testing. So that effort will still be starting early next year, so something for stakeholders to keep an eye on. Next slide, please. On the wheel-through effort, also known as the transmission service and market scheduling priorities, we made our filing in July with the Commission. We have now received a number of comments, and we actually submitted a response to the comments on the 5th of September. We're hoping to get an order by the Commission by October. And in the last set of comments, we received four parties protested the filing, and a number of other parties commented and specifically asked for some clarifications or changes to aspects of the filing. I would like to note that only one external party, actually one external load serving entity, protested the filing, and one internal load-serving entity submitted a limited protest, but supported overall the various elements of the proposal. I do want to note that this has been a less contentious proceeding than the last time we made a filing in this matter. And this hopefully is an indication that we've struck a better balance between the internal LLC's need to ensure that they have enough import capacity and access to the import capacity. And at the same time, we want to make sure that the wheel-throughs have an opportunity to be served at a higher priority or equal priority to native load based on the reservations and investments that they make on the system. So as I noted, we're hoping to get an order by October, and this will be on our first phase of this effort. We're also working towards completing the tariff for the second phase of this effort, which then this second phase focuses on the study and expansion approach for establishing wheel-through. This is beyond the first phase approach, is really focused on determination of available transmission capacity on the system and allocating that out to wheel-throughs. The second phase looks to allow for additional enhancements to study and expand the system for enabling those wheel-throughs. We're targeting a FERC filing in January of 2024 and working with stakeholders to complete this effort now. Next slide, please. We're also gearing up to start our next round of discussions on the resource efficiency enhancements. When we last left this effort, we had a few items that we wanted to follow up on. And now with the lessons that we learned this past summer, with the summer events, and as Elliot noted, we've since posted our thorough report of the July experience, where we're going to be looking at the lessons learned in that analysis to inform our discussions. I also wanted to note that over this past summer, but 5 balancing authority areas, including the ISO, actually elected to utilize the assistance energy transfer functionality, and that is the functionality that you all approved earlier this year to allow parties to access assistance energy through the imbalance energy market rather than being limited when they fail the test. We saw that over a period of about 6 days in July, the WEIM entities incurred surcharges for these types of transfers, and it amounted to about $42,000 in total. So it did allow for additional access, and we'll obviously continue evaluating that effort, which is proving to be helpful thus far. Also wanted to note that we are on track for implementing the leftover enhancements that we filed for and committed to in phase 2 of this effort, and those should be in place in fall of 2023, which will really help us with the situational awareness related to ISO BA exports and aligning those with the E-tags. Next slide, please. Well, before I get into the next series of slides, I did want to just note that, earlier this year, after we, in recognition of the successful outcome out of the EDAM working group efforts with stakeholders, we started to pivot and really engage in a stakeholder process that is much more working group focused. And so in some of the critical initiatives that we were taking on, actually not all of them were just starting, some of them were already underway, we decided to really formulate a working group environment for a number of these initiatives. And as Elliot noted, and across the board, including the interconnection policy enhancements that we've been undertaking. But critical to the regional market space, we have focused our efforts to really start the initiative, and it's not going to be always at the start of initiative, and I want to emphasize that because we're trying to really adopt the working group effort as necessary across the board. But given that we were starting off a number of initiatives here in the regional market development, we started some critical working groups to really spend some time with stakeholders and engaging with them and formulating the problem statements, evaluating the data needs that are necessary to really support the policy development, and really starting to get formulate a level playing field, if you wish, on the basic understanding and basic rules that we're looking at to really start to think about how these rules could change. We've heard a lot from stakeholders for the need for education during these critical working group times to allow for questioning as well as learning to really inform the stakeholder community as you then start to get to the policy formulation stages. So we started this with 3 of our efforts, as I noted, in the regional market space. And generally, all of these are in fairly nascent stages, and the stakeholders have been showing up and participating very actively in the discussions. I wanted to note that the working group efforts, we do think it's necessary to have specific work products we expect coming out of this. And generally what we're trying to accomplish is that throughout the working group discussions, there are discussion papers that are formulated. They can be formulated by ISO, they can be staff, they can be formulated by stakeholders, but there's this progression of discussion papers that then is transformed, if you wish, through the discussions into an action plan. And that action plan coming out of the working group is really pivotal to inform the next series of iterative policy development. And we heard a lot from stakeholders as well that although they really like the working group efforts, they still also want to see that iterative stakeholder process so they have an opportunity to process and comment and participate on that. But it's critical that the action plan that comes out of the working group efforts gets transformed into the policy development process, and we have something to work with coming out of these efforts. So we're taking that time. I also wanted to note that we have formulated the working groups so that they're actually facilitated not by the policy developers themselves, but they're really more facilitated by either our stakeholder engagement folks. In some cases, we're looking externally for facilitation. The reason for that is because we really want to provide everybody the opportunity, including the ISO staff, as well as all stakeholders, to really engage in the discussions and have facilitators that draw those discussions out from everybody. So I'm really happy to report that thus far with these working group efforts, we're seeing real progress, real engagement by stakeholders. And with the new COVID restrictions, maybe in-person meetings will not be as feasible, but we'll continue over the upcoming months to have these working group meetings extended. I will say that we have about 2 to 3 a week, depending on the flow of each segment, and that seems to be keeping people quite busy, but still seeing quite a bit of participation and engagement. So I'm very happy to report that thus far we're getting good feedback about these working groups and good participation. So now I will touch a little bit on each one of these working groups. On price formation, we facilitated a number of working groups already. I want to note we focused a lot on scarcity pricing in terms of what the problem statements are, as well as what is going to be the focus on the evolution of market power mitigation at the BAA level in the EDAM and possibly in EIM as well. And last week and the past few discussions we've had, we've been able to come together in terms of common understanding of what we plan on doing with market power mitigation at the start of EDAM and what our next steps might be, and good discussions in that area. Now we're focused in the upcoming weeks on a discussion on fast start pricing and what that analysis will look like. We will have Guillermo and his team actively engaged in this particular segment of the working groups to engage closely with stakeholders on what will be the elements of the study that we will conduct, and make sure that we survey and incorporate the stakeholder input in that evaluation of what fast start pricing might mean for the WEIM markets, across the board, as well as what form of possible fast start pricing we might be looking at. So that's, I would say, sort of the start. We've talked a lot about fast start pricing over the past year or so in other forums, but this will be really the sort of the start of putting down some data points on formulating that analysis. Finally, I did want to note that we had the opportunity to share on an update with the body of state regulators as well as the RIF on these matters, and both those conversations are helpful for us because we not only have the opportunity to inform those bodies, but also get feedback as to how these efforts are going. So thank you. Next slide, please. On the greenhouse gas coordination, this is an area where we have really just started to, again, re-engage with stakeholders on what the evolution of greenhouse gas accounting might look like in the WEIM as well as EDAM markets. And we've conducted a number of working groups, and I think we've had more than those two meetings. This slide might be a little out of date, I apologize, but we've had a really good, fruitful conversation with stakeholders. Stakeholders have asked us to focus on reviewing the market operations. There's a lot of need for folks to really come up to speed as to how things work under the current paradigm and spend some additional time on understanding those fundamental principles. So we're taking some time for education and also considering what because we have a diverse number of programs developing across the West, what does that mean in terms of how we incorporate those varied diversity of programs in the market products? And finally, we spent a lot of time also talking to stakeholders about emissions tracking, analysis, and accounting to support compliance with the various programs, not all of which have the same parameters and requirements. This is one area where most recently we got some feedback where stakeholders want us to take a little bit more time on discussing the issues before we jump to problem statements, which is a good thing to do. And so we are going to make some time and space available for that type of discussion in our upcoming working groups to ensure that stakeholders feel that we have adequately addressed that. Next slide, please. The last working group effort I wanted to touch on is the gas management working group effort. This one came about after some requests from the WEIM participants regarding their concerns and constraints in managing gas and electricity requirements on their systems. And so thank you to the RIF, and thanks to the RIF's initiative in this area to have held a very productive session in getting us going on this discussion. We were able to really jump right into the working group with participants to start thinking about even some, what I like to refer to as low-hanging fruit on some potential improvements we can make, and then some longer-term investments we can make and changes we can make in the market design to allow for better coordination. So these working groups are going very well. We've received some good participation and great involvement. Finally, I don't have a slide on this, but as Chair Campbell noted earlier, we are very happy to be presenting a proposal in 4 distinct areas that implicate the ISO's BA participation EDAM. This is very pivotal, of course, because it allows us the ability to participate in at the launch of the EDAM. And the 4 areas touch on the settlement of transfers internal to the ISO BAA, transfer revenues related to transfers that occur out of the EDAM optimization, as well as congestion revenue that occurs between the various balancing authority areas. These components and revenues are already part of the EDAM design. All we're doing here is proposing how those get allocated back to participants within the ISO BAA. We also have a proposal for the allocation of revenue collected to ensure there isn't an erosion of historical transmission revenue to all EDAM entities. And as the BAA, for California. We'll be receiving some of those historical transmission revenue recovery. We have a way of allocating those out to CAISO BA participants. We also have proposal for the settlement of any revenues or surcharges associated with the either failing of the EDAM resource efficiency evaluation, or if you're not failing and you're passing, you receive revenue, and we have proposal on how, again, to allocate that out to the ISO BA constituents. And finally, we have a proposal on how the ISO will manage the EDAM net export constraint, which is available to all participants in the EDAM. Each BAA has an opportunity to decide how it will set the net export constraint. And for the CAISO BAA, we establish certain parameters with the on how that is going to be set. And that's the proposal we have tomorrow. So with that, it completes my remarks, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Anna. And we will be going in just a few moments over for public comment, but we'll provide an opportunity for governing body members first. I did want to say, Anna, thank you so much. I appreciate the description of the working group process overall, sort of the philosophy and approach and structure. That's yeah, it's nice to hear that's kind of really kind of fleshing out in terms of the formulation you're using to kind of make sure there's a lot of value coming out of those processes and it's flowing into the proposals down the road. Vice Chair Kanziolka.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. Anna, thank you for this overview. You covered an incredible amount of territory, and clearly there is a lot going on. So I appreciate being kept up to date. I'm going to focus in on just one area, and that is the transmission services and marketing scheduling priorities. As you noted, that was a pretty long and arduous journey to get to the filing. And, we know that, a number of elements were argued, and ultimately, staff reached the balancing that was submitted for the FERC approval. In the protest, I was just curious if there were any new arguments that were raised that were not addressed by anybody previous to the submittal.
I will limit some of my comments, by the way, given that this is a pending litigated matter. But there were a number of parties who I would say perhaps were touched on matters that were previously discussed, but that had not raised those issues in the record in the stakeholder process. And they did raise some concerns related to also the evolution of certain other things that just were not at play during that time. There were some, so we responded to their concerns, and hopefully that will provide, some form of a response. I will say that there are still some, some parties who feel like there should be more time spent, but that was not necessarily reflected in the large component.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I appreciate that.
Any other governing body questions or comments? Okay, Silas, if you could please tee up the public comment.
If you have a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or you can press #2 on the phone only line to enter the verbal queue. There seems to be no comments in the queue at this time.
Okay, thank you, Silas. And you're repeating Rob's comment. It's pretty impressive, the amount of activity going on now. I think there had been a feeling, oh, we got to EDAM, we got to DAME, and now, wow, there's like very major initiatives going forward, and they're in various phases. They're all clearly very important, and they're also kind of testament to these markets being an ongoing project, and there will continue to be opportunities to improve and adapt to the world around us. But thank you, Anna, for your presentation.
You're welcome, and thank you for the opportunity.
Welcome. So unless well, that's our last item. So with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you all. Great. Thank you.